The Dope Show. The Dope Show. The Dope Show.
Well, these are really bad times for asymmetrical horror games. Evil Dead is done, and now the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is basically done. Even though we all knew this was coming, I think that the timing of this has caught a lot of us off guard, because the game just hit PlayStation Plus not too long ago. But we all knew that this day was coming. And I'm not just talking about the support for the game ending, I'm also talking about their behavior. We knew we were going to get a bunch of bullshit. We knew we were going to get a bunch of the narratives that they like to push. We knew that we were going to get a bunch of lies and even possibly some finger pointing. And this post will not be the end of it. Now, I personally thought this announcement would come after this Christmas. But here it is. We didn't even make it to a 2-year anniversary. So, the numbers are what they are. Gun is who they are. They operate the way they do. So it is what it is. How you feeling about it? Huh? Now, I'm not going to sit here and read you this entire post because most of it is complete bullshit. But there are some very important pieces of this post that I would like to talk to you about. Okay, so we don't need to read any of this. This is just them trying to tell a sappy story and trying to build a narrative. This is one of the most important parts of this post. We feel proud of the game we've made, and we're happy that we're at a point where we feel the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has reached its full potential. You have got to be fucking kidding me. You have got to be fucking kidding me. All right, let's break this down. So first off, this right here, we feel proud of the game we've made. Okay, so I think there's a little bit of truth there. I think they are proud that they made the game, and they should be. Because most people are just talkers. Most people don't do anything, they don't create anything, they don't go after what it is they really want to do in life. They just sit back on the internet and they point fingers and they snicker. Oh, this person's cringe, that's cringe. But they don't do shit themselves. And I would like to congratulate them. I will absolutely congratulate them on going out and getting the license and working hard on various different aspects of the game and bringing the game into existence. They should absolutely be proud of that. But see, then they gotta go and ruin it with lies. We're happy that we're at a point where we feel the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has reached its full potential. Nobody with 2 brain cells is buying that. This game launched in a state that it never should have launched in. This game launched incomplete. It is still incomplete. This game has massive potential. This game could have been a real contender. This game could have been a real competitor to DBD. This game is nowhere near its full potential. And I think everybody that, bought the game and played the game for a good amount of time, regardless of whether you were a dual player like myself, playing, both victim and family, or even if you just played one side, you can see that this game has massive potential. And that's the tragedy, is that it will never get there. Not unless, they want to sell the game to a real company. But that's probably not going to happen. What they did was they built an extremely strong foundation for this game with fantastic ideas, and they never finished it. They never refined them. So this game has an amazing foundation, but everything else is fucked up. The plumbing doesn't work. The electricity's shoddy. Somebody took a shit in the kitchen. Nobody wants to admit to it. Nobody wants to clean it up. The roof leaks. We're 3 months behind on our property taxes. And everybody can see it. They have all these great ideas. So they put out this incomplete game with massive potential. And now they're abandoning it. And then they put out a post like this because they don't respect you. They have the gall to post something like this because they do not respect you. And quite honestly, a lot of you don't deserve respect because a lot of you out there were bootlickers to these people. Don't think I didn't see you. I saw you on the subreddits that I got banned from. Badge of honor, by the way. I got banned from both subreddits. They're both trash, hypocritical subs anyway. They know a lot of you out there are just kids and you don't know any better. And obviously kids are excused because you're just kids. You're undeveloped people. Hopefully you got some good parents to guide you. I mean, we can look no further than their comment section. So not that you guys don't know where to find this article, but I did leave a link to it in the description. So if you decide to read all this BS yourself, this is about money. This is about money. Do not let them tell you anything else. Do not let anybody else tell you any different. This is about money. Now, it could be the case that Gun does not have the funds to keep supporting the game. That could be the case. We don't know that. And if that is the case, they should have just come out, on the humble, just come out, be humble and be honest and just say so. There is far more dignity in that, I think. I think a lot of people would respect that far more. I think they'd actually gain a little bit more respect, right? Because if that is the case, where it's just, they just don't have the money, and Wes or, the company as a whole would decide to just lie about it rather than just admit to it, what does that tell you about this company? What does that tell you about this company? Probably a bunch of things that you already knew if you're somebody that's been paying attention, right? Now, it could also be the case that Wes just doesn't want to invest any more money in the game. This does not necessarily mean that they're broke. He could have just decided a year ago or more when the game launched, whatever, hey, this is how much I'm willing to invest in this game. Whatever. Here's $500,000, and I'm not spending any more than that. All right? You got $500,000. We're going to finish these cosmetics. We're going to finish this map. We're going to work on this over here. We're going to fix some bugs. And if things don't turn around, I'm pulling the plug. And we're moving on to whatever else they're moving on to. That could absolutely be the case. But the bottom line here is that this is about money. Don't let anybody tell you any different. And let me just give you a quick example of why. If this game had grown, if this game was growing, or if it had grown the way that it should have, if they hadn't botched everything, right? So if this game was constantly growing, if they were retaining players, specifically family players, and they were raking in constant revenue, just like DBD does with their overpriced cosmetics, do you really believe that this game would still be shutting down? Do you believe that? This is about the lack of money in one way or another. But rather than just saying that, they're trying to spin this narrative of, we're just bored. We've done everything we want to do, and we're just going to move on to bigger things with some class. You buying that? So I can tell you who's not. Now, something else you need to take away from this post is that this company is predatory. This is a predatory company. They prey on horror fans because they know, right? Because I have no doubt that they're hardcore horror fans. I do not doubt that for a second. So they know that the horror community is, kind of marginalized and shunned. People look at us like we're weirdos. And they know that the horror community is always hungry for new movies and shows and games, comics, whatever. Just content overall. But let me tell you something about predators. They know who their prey is, and they understand how to exploit their prey. So they're willing to post something like this because they don't respect you. And they know that if next week they announce a Nightmare on Elm Street game or a Halloween game, whatever, maybe the original idea, whatever, pick your franchise. If they announced it next week, you would have a substantial portion of people. You would have a substantial portion of people that would just forget all about this company's track record. And they would line up with money in hand and thumb up their ass. Furthermore, again, there are a lot of kids that greatly bolster the population of these games. And kids just don't know any better. But for the rest of you out there, if you're an adult, always remember that whatever your insecurities are, whatever your interests are, there's always someone out there preying on you. There's always somebody out there trying to sell you something, right? And that's who this company is. They know that there's a lot of people out there that are sick of DBD. People want something else. They know there's a lot of Friday the 13th refugees out there. There's a lot of Evil Dead refugees out there. There's obviously a lot of overlap between all of the games. So they know that the desire is out there and they're going to exploit it. They're going to exploit many of you by, either obtaining another license if they haven't already, or putting out an original idea, and people are going to line up. They're going to forget about this. There's a lot of people that don't know anything about this company, and they're just going to do it again because they can put out a half-baked game, sell a bunch of copies, sell a bunch of DLC, and then tuck tail and run when things get tough. That I think is most important that you should take away from this post. They have an unwillingness to admit guilt. They're completely unwilling to accept responsibility. You can just look at the design of this game. It's just like its framework for what the game was supposed to be. That's what this is. And they won't take any responsibility for it. All the useless perks, all the, broken game mechanics, all the, just game mechanics that were never explored. They were never refined, like the grapple system. You could take it down just to the individual character designs. The game is too basic. They have an unwillingness to admit guilt, to take any responsibility. And it shouldn't surprise you that all of these, that these people form a company, whatever that may be. They don't take responsibility for their actions. Just look at the game. They launched an incomplete game and they never finished it. What we got was the framework for a game. That's what we got. That's what you've been playing. Let's be honest. They set out to create a stealth, asymmetrical horror game. And everybody knows that's not what we got. They abandoned the stealth. They abandoned consequences. They abandoned all of the great ideas that they had, whether it be, the grapple systems, crawl spaces, gaps, barricades, the individual character designs. You should have gotten an experience for each character. There should be a Connie experience. There should be a Sissy experience. Multiple things that each character can do, and things that are hard that you have to learn. And that's one of the things that would keep people coming back to play. But getting a little off track here, but more specifically, if you look at this little piece right here, see, again, this is what good liars do. They mix things that are absolutely true with their lies and with the narratives that they want to push. Now, maybe I'm reading too far into it, but what else do you think she's saying here? Why even type this out? It's not for everybody. Well, we already know that, right? People have different tastes. You could say that about anything. Hey, RPGs are not for everybody. Yeah, I know. Did you know that puzzle games aren't for everybody? I don't think first-person shooters are for everybody. Yeah, that's true. We know that. But I don't think that's what she's trying to say here. I think what she's trying to say is that the market for asymmetrical horror isn't lucrative enough, right? She's trying to say, oh, this is, it's too exclusive. So since they're unwilling to take responsibility for their actions, and the truth is just they launched an incomplete game and they botched this game. That's what happened. They botched this game. They built amazing framework for it and they did not finish it. They stopped working on the game. All right, let me just show you guys a little clip because I know a lot of you out there are new. This is very old from the time the game launched. What do you see is missing from this clip? Anybody? There's no gate. Yeah. They added that. When they used to still work on the game, they added that. They identified that this area was an enormous problem. They took responsibility and they fixed it, right? And just by adding that gate, you just incrementally improved the game a little bit, or a lot really, but you improved the game. See, that's how we started out. And I think that's why a lot of people like myself had faith that they would keep working on the game, that they would keep that going, keep identifying things that were a problem and fix it. Let's do another one. Let me show you guys another clip here. Now, the OG players out there know exactly what this is. You new players, I'm sure you're probably like, what is this? What map is this? This is Slaughterhouse. The pressure tank used to be in the basement. Now, so there were 2 other locations, maybe 3, that would spawn over in or nearby Leatherface's lair. Now, this location I didn't have a problem with. My problem was with the next thing that they fixed, which was there didn't used to be regression on the tank, right? You would think that would be a no-brainer considering what we're talking about, right? But there was no regression on the pressure, right? And you can see how long it takes me to close this valve, even without somebody stabbing me in the back, right? But they identified this as a problem and they fixed it. Now, doesn't necessarily mean I like or agree with the new locations, but they took responsibility and they took action. And again, this was the kinds of thing they used to do. Very slowly, yes, very slowly. But I think a lot of people like myself gave them a pass because they're a small company, as long as we were seeing improvements in the game. I personally was very happy. In this video, I'm not going to go into every last thing that's wrong with the game. I had already started a series of videos, and I'm going to release those later on when they're done. We'll probably do, August 18th or somewhere thereabouts. Now, just as another example, I'm going to continue to use their own posts against them, just to further prove that they had an opportunity and they dropped the ball. They shit the bed. They're too busy being prideful and not being willing to admit their mistakes, not being willing to admit when something's a problem. They're too busy listening to 12-year-olds on the subreddit, on their highly censored, highly curated subreddit, by the way. It's horrible. They're too busy doing stupid things like applying a 3-minute penalty to people for leaving the lobby. Not the game, the lobby. If you back out of a lobby, you get a 3-minute penalty. Not the game, the lobby. I've been playing video games online for quite some time. That is one of the stupidest things I have ever heard of. I've never even heard such a thing suggested, but that's what this company chose to do. Okay, I know there's a lot of new people out there, but does everybody remember this? Right? Okay. Let's assume that this is true. Let's say they were actually being truthful, and they probably were, because this is something that they could use to brag. This is something that they could use for marketing. Look at how successful we are, right? Even though at this point, the game was a complete mess, right? Because this is like pretty much right after the point where they let Danny basically burn the game down for about 3 or 4 months, right? But, again, they have the gall to put something like this out. Okay, we're going to ignore the Game Pass traffic. We're just going to focus in on the 1.1 million sold for right now. Okay. Do you understand what that 1.1 million represents? That's how many people said, hey, take my $40, take my $20, take my $30, whatever they bought it for. Okay. That is your installation base. You have an installed base of 1.1 million people. That means that 1.1 million people had the license to fire this game up on their console or their PC or whatever they're playing it on. I don't think it was ready on Steam Deck yet. I'm not sure, but whatever. That was their installed base of potential people that could get on and play this game. So what happened to all those people? And we can be polite. We can be honest. You know, there are people that have the attention span of, you know, that have just no attention span. You know, you have all these dopamine addicts out here, right? So, you know, if we're honest and fair, a lot of games lose, you know, traffic. You know, they're hot when they first come out, and then people move on to something else. You know, people bought it, it wasn't what they were looking for, and they move on. So we can be fair about that. Oh, but then we have to talk about the 4.5 million players on Game Pass, don't we? Because that's who was propping this game up for the longest time. So if we just want to be fair, if we want to be fair as possible, right? Because we know that they've sold more units at this point, and then the game just recently hit PlayStation Plus, right? So let's just go from right now. Let's just say that they had 6 million people touch this game, right? So we can literally say that millions of gamers played this game. What happened to them? Where are they? Why did they stop playing? Right? Because they're the ones pushing it out here. We sold 1.1 million copies. At some point, there were 4.5 million players playing it on Game Pass. Right? What did I tell you guys? What was I telling you guys in the subreddits? Because I am one of those guys. I am petty like that. I will tell you, I fucking told you so. I have no qualms about that. I told you they were going to get kicked off of Game Pass. And once they were no longer on Game Pass, you had all these little kids in the subreddit panicking, right? Because real deal, they needed mommy and daddy to go buy the game for them, right? Same as when the game hit PlayStation Plus here recently. I told you, PlayStation Plus is not going to save the game. So my point here is that it would not matter if they sold 5 million units. It would not matter if they had 5 million people on Game Pass and another 5 million on PlayStation Plus, right? So even if you have 15 million people try the game, everybody was just going to have the same dog experience because the game is incomplete, because they chose not to take responsibility for all the horrible things in the game, whether it be the door slams, the lack of character design, or I guess you could even call it skill ceiling, you know, just providing something for every character that makes you want to come back and play. You know, you want to work at something, you know, it took them forever to do anything about Grapple Mania when they should have addressed it, like, I don't know, within like the first 2 months the game was out. The way the lobbies work, various different things about them. I mean, I could go on and on and on. The point is it didn't matter what platform you were playing on. It did not matter whether you bought the game, whether you were playing on Game Pass, or whether you're playing on PlayStation Plus. It was always going to be the same shitty experience because they did not take responsibility for the game. Instead, they wasted time. They wasted time and resources on things like implementing a penalty for leaving the lobby. Not the game, the lobby. Or this tacked on rush week. What kind of resources and time did you waste by tacking this onto the game? Cool concept. I would absolutely be interested in a completed version of this game. Absolutely. But it's incomplete, just like everything else. And you know what Rush Week is? It's just a glorified overflow tank for victim-only players, because everybody wanted to play victim in abundance, and they had no other place to put them except in queue, because they refused to take responsibility for all of the problems from the family side. Like, how many red flags do you, if you have people, I'm not going to go too far into this. We're going to cover this in later videos. But if you have people that are willing to wait 5 minutes to get into a lobby and then sit around in the lobby watching people go in and out just for an opportunity to play from the victim side, right? People just falling over themselves, trampling each other, falling over themselves, just for an opportunity to get in a game to play victim. And you can't get 3 people to stay in the lobby as family and actually play the game without disconnecting at the beginning How many, like that is an armada of red flags. Like, I know we'll probably never see the numbers, but the ratio of victim players to people that were willing to play family must have been huge. Huge. Because at any given point, you can get in a lobby to play family in what was it, like 11 seconds, 10 seconds, 11 seconds or something? And you don't know what it's going to be as victim. At what point do you take responsibility and say, hey, we need to address this because this is killing our business. This is killing our game. And what do they choose to do? Because they want to listen to 12-year-olds on the subreddit. Okay, let's apply a lobby penalty and try to force people to participate in a situation they don't want to participate in. What if there's a known hacker in the lobby? What if your Uber Eats showed up early? What if your kids are screaming in the back of the house and you got to go see what's going on, right? What if there's a bully squad on the other side you don't feel like dealing with? What if you recognize that your two teammates are people that are going to disconnect at the beginning of the game, right? So don't tell me that there's not a reason to leave a lobby. Like, it's a lobby. A lobby. That's what the lobby is for. If you're not going to show me, if you're not going to give me a preview beforehand, that's what the lobby's for. Shopping. You come in. Oh, what map is it? What do my teammates look like? What's going on the other side? Do I want to participate in this? Right? Maybe I don't want to play Family House for the 5th or 6th time in a row. And don't tell me that I'm the only person that happened to. Maybe I don't want to play Family House for the 5th or 6th time in a row. Maybe I don't want to be on Graveyard. That's what the lobby is for. If you're not going to show me beforehand, then I'm going to come in and I'm going to shop. They didn't take responsibility for this game. That's what happened, right? So what do we have? We have a predatory company that's unwilling to accept responsibility and take action. They don't respect the horror community and they have a bad track record. So that's why Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the game, is shutting down and Dead by Daylight is celebrating their 9th anniversary. This is Frank Midnight signing off.